All right, how's it going, everybody? This is Founder Laerun, having a little technical difficulties. I'm going to do some line of sight, basically terrain and some occluders to the outside of this map. This is a top-down outside view. I have a few different features in here that I'm going to show. Hopefully this will help you a little bit when you have to work outside. I did a stream yesterday. It did more interior work. Today I'm going to do more outside work, and hopefully this will help you a little bit. I'm working on a module right now, so this really wasn't intended to be a lesson per se, but if you pick something up along the way, or if you have any questions or suggestions, go ahead and leave that in the chat, and I'll try to get back with you. Okay, so first things first. In Fantasy Grounds, I have the map, and this is actually a copy of the original. So in the Maps and Images area, there's another outdoor view. So if you go to Map, Outdoor View, there's two of them. One of them is in the original module. This other one is the map that I'm editing. When you're making copies of these, this is for when you are trying to make two different versions. So the classic version's already done. Now I'm making the Unity version, and all I'm doing is doing the map coordinates for the occluders. So when you have these extra copies, basically the ones without the little book next to it, that's what I'm working on right now. So just so you know where I'm at on that. And then there's a special group. It's called Wilderness Outfitter. So that's where all these maps are going to reside. So when I extract the data out of this particular campaign, it'll be dropped into the file of the original Unity Classic, or excuse me, the Fantasy Grounds Classic module. And at that point, it'll be able to read line of sight, or you could just use it in Classic. So that's what I'm working on right now. I didn't intend to really make this a stream per se, but I figured if I'm going to be working on this, I might as well share some of my follies and problems and such that I go through with this. So first things first is I have it unlocked. It has a grid on it already from Classic. It's already told Unity to go ahead and turn on the grid. However, I want to tone this down and maybe even change the color. I don't know. But I know that this gray tone is not very easy on the eyes, and it's kind of obnoxious. So I'm going to go to the grid mode, which is where you should start anyways. So if you don't have a grid, this is where you'd put it on. It's set to 48 by 48, which is basically 50 by 50. The other thing is that I want to turn down this thickness or the transparency of this line. So you do that by clicking on the color picker, which is this little color wheel up on top here. And as you open it, you have a choice to change the colors and blend and do whatever you want. There's an eyedropper, so you can get the background color if you wanted to. In this case, this A channel is the alpha channel, so if you kind of lower that down, you'll still have the grid, but it won't be as obnoxious. And that's what you want. So I want to maybe bump it up a hair. I think about 40 is a good. Heck, even 50 looks good. Okay, so we have the grid, but it's not as noticeable now. And that's important for your game if you don't want to get distracted with, with these grid lines. Another thing is if you wanted to change the color, you could actually do that, and then you would have to adjust the alpha, of course. So actually that light blue actually looks pretty good, being that snow, so I might keep that. And anyhow, this is what you would do to kind of keep your grid from being too crazy. And I did bump up the alpha a little bit, but like I said, it's a matter of taste and flavor. So I think I'm going to go with 100. I think that's a good happy medium for the transparency because you still see it, but when you zoom out, it's not as prominent. And that's what you want. You kind of want a real neutral look to it. But if you want to turn it off and it'll still be active, but you don't want to see it, you can actually turn the grid off. But then it's hard to tell if you have a token sitting halfway on or off. So it's good to have the grid on usually, but it depends on the situation. Okay, so the next thing is I'm going to start thinking about what types of tools that I want to work with. And I think I'm going to work on this pool of water first. This is actually a natural hot spring that was founded when this place was built. They felt it was a good idea to build it next to this natural hot spring because it is pretty hot. And they've actually tapped into it and used it to heat the home and the bathhouse. So they were able to take advantage of it. And they also use it for entertainment and also for hot water. So it's really handy to have something like this here. It's kind of like in Iceland where they have all the different things that they can use, natural hot springs and lots of geothermal things going on there. So I'm going to size the frame to where I want it. Right now it's a little big. One of the things you got to be careful with Fantasy Grounds and any map software is don't go too big. And what I mean too big is this map is actually a little bit big. So when you actually stretch it out and put it at its full size, it takes up almost this whole screen. So when you zoom in, you're going to lose some of your finer detail depending on the resolution. So try to keep your maps. I wouldn't have any bigger than this type of regional map if you can help it, because it's annoying because you have to keep scrolling in and out and moving it, and it can be a real bear. So I'm going to go navigate, and I'm using this little gold square here, and zoom in a little bit on this natural feature here. So I got to be careful with this because it already has steam built into the picture. So what I'm going to do is add a water layer, but then I'm going to add my own steam on top of it, and hopefully it blends. So basically I'm going to make this look kind of fancy. I'm going to color around the edges here and basically make an effect of water. And I'm going to make it real subtle because you won't be able to see a lot of the water because of the turbulence and also the steam here. And this is in a pit, so it's kind of like, probably about 10, 15 feet down. Okay, and then as you can see, people have been walking around the edge of it because people go down in here and they'll actually get inside here and sit around the edge. This water is probably about, I don't know, 35 to 40 degrees Celsius, or in the hundreds in Fahrenheit. So it's really, uh, really hot, and you can't stay in it for very long. But once it's piped into the buildings and stuff, it loses some of its heat, so it's actually pretty comfortable once it gets to the buildings. There is a Steamworks, a real minor one built into the bathhouse, and then under the ground you can't see it, but there's a smaller one of these, and it's enclosed. It's in a cavern. It's actually underneath the house, and they use the heat and natural warmth to warm up the floors. And so they have a natural radiant heating in their house, which is really nice. Then over here in the campground, they've actually they have a dwarf in their midst. So this is a covered area. You come out here and it's kind of like a barbecue type area. Over here was meant so you can pitch your tents and set up a fire here. So basically what happens is during the daytime when people are camping, and if any of the snow melts or anything, there's a drain field underneath here. So there's a bunch of gravel and soil on top. And then anytime the snow or ice melts, especially around the fire pit and where people are walking, that snow and ice will melt into water and it seeps down into the soil and into the gravel, and then it drains. So there's a slight slope here that's not easy to show, but it actually drains this way. So the dwarf has it set up to where if there's any overrun or drainage needed, It comes through the bathhouse underneath the drain field or into the drain field, which filters it out, and then it just pushes all of it out here out into the open wilderness. Same thing with the house. It has facilities in the house, like a restroom type thing, and anything like an outhouse or any kind of drainage that needs to come out, like a sewage, it goes out into the drain field. So it's kind of a nice setup. A dwarf is handy to have in this case. All right, so basically, I'm going to start working on the pond, or in this case, it's a hot spring. So what I'm going to do is add an effect. So the first thing I'm going to do is, this is actually the layer of the map. The map's already on here. It's painted. It's ready to go. So I'll just leave that there. We already set the grid. And now I'm going to move over to this line of sight mode. And that's where we're going to draw some of our features. But I'm going to basically go back to the layers mode for right now. And as you can see, I have this locked, so we can't move the map. That's very important. If you're going to re-coordinate a map and import it or export it to where it can be used in both Unity and Classic, you have to leave these coordinates. Otherwise, all the things that you plot will be off. So you always want to lock this layer no matter what. Just a little warning. So I'm going to actually make an effects layer. So effects are actually on their own separate layer, and they have their own separate tool. So if you come down at the bottom, there's an add effects layer. So I'm going to do that first. And then you have to choose the effect. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and pick water. And as you can see, I got this whole map covered with water, which we don't want. So in order to stop that from happening, or to not have this whole map looking that way, there's a plus button right up above the water effect. You click that, and it layers a hidden mask, a transparent mask over the top of it. So now you cannot see the water. So now what you have to do is decide if you want to reveal or hide. In this case, it'll be reveal because we're basically cutting a hole in the mask. So let me just kind of draw roughly. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I'm going to draw around the periphery of this thing, of this hot tub. And I'm going to go ahead and hit the Alt key, because if you don't, it's just going to do a big square. So I might do that in the beginning to get an idea of the size, but it's just better if I freehand it. So I'm just going to hit Alt, hold down the Alt key, and kind of trace around the contour. Doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. Now, as you can see, it looks a little off because of the steam, but actually it gives the steam some movement too, so it's not too bad. But you can adjust the amount that it moves. So I'm going to go ahead and lower some of this stuff and make it a little bit more subtle. So now it just looks like it's just barely moving. So I want to put the intensity to about 8. That actually, and then the speed, you go like that, it looks like it's quivering. So you want to kind of give it a natural flow. That looks pretty good at 10. And so there's just a minor kind of reflective look to it, and it gives the impression of liquid or water. So the next thing I'm going to do is add some of the bubbles, which is missing out of here. And I want to put that underneath this layer. So before I do anything else, I'm going to make a folder, which is this add folder button. I double click on that to rename it. So I'm just going to call this, water effects or something like that. And I'm going to drag the water effect that I just placed into that folder. And this is for organizational reasons. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is add another layer, which is called Ocean. So again, I'm going to click on the Add Effects layer. It's a whole separate layer. And I'm going to use the drop down, and I'm going to go to Ocean. So what Ocean does is it adds this kind of distortion. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take and, first of all, put a mask on it. And then for this distortion, I'm only going to have it like a little bit more in the center. I'm not going to go all the way to the edge. So this is going to be something that's more active in the center of this thing as opposed to the whole area. So it's just going to be basically this bluish area in the center. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm in the reveal area. Right on, Melina. So I got this reveal area, and all I'm doing here is I'm going to trace a little bit around the contour of it, but a little tighter inside because I have the water line out here. So what I want to make sure I do is that I make this more like the center is hotter or more active than the outside. So what I'm going to do is just start tracing around in here, just freehand, no perfection required. And then I'm going to also hold down the Alt key so I can draw free-handedly. So now you can see that kind of that weird distortion in the center. Well, it doesn't quite look right because it's probably, yeah, it's sitting on top of the water. So in order to help with that, now it's sitting underneath the waves, so it's not as prominent. And I'm going to turn it down so it's not as active as it was before. And then the speed of it, I'm going to turn it up a little because it is very active and violent in the center. So that gives you the impression that there's bubbles percolating up inside the water, and that this ocean layer is actually underneath the water layer so that it doesn't give you that grief, that you're, it's, if you touch the outsides, it pulls in that imagery out there and it really looks horrible. So if you keep it contained within an area and control it, it looks really good. And actually it's starting to shape up a little. So the speed's about right. The vertical size changes how it moves vertically, and then the horizontal size changes the horizontal movement. And I want this to be more horizontal in movement, so the vertical is going to be a little less, and the horizontal is going to be more. And then the speed is going to be about 50. There we go. See, it's real subtle. You can't even hardly tell it's there, but it gives that center more movement. And actually, I got to turn the speed down. It looks a little too crazy. There we go. So that gives you that turbulent kind of water look to it. And again, I put this ocean layer underneath the water because if I move it and the distortion layer is on top, it doesn't quite blend in as nicely as it would if it's underneath. It kind of has a weird, you could see the outline of it more, and I don't want that. So there we go. So it's a little less noticeable, not much, it's just a hair. And now I'm going to actually put some steam over the top because I don't want this to look like part of the water as much. So I'm going to follow the original steam lines here. So what I'm going to do is take and put a water effect, a separate layer for this steam coming off the water. Ideally, you'd want to use 3 different layers. I think I might do that just to see how it turns out, because you want them at different speeds and different variations. Otherwise, it's going to look like one big ripple. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new folder. And I'm going to call this Steam Effects. That way I have a separate folder just in case. And now I'm going to create another layer, effects layer. And right now I don't have anything selected. So I'm going to go with, I might go with clouds this time because there's more variation in it. I don't know, maybe just mist. Okay, so the mist is going the wrong direction and it's really fast. So to change the speed, you can go left to right. I want it to go that way, to the right. So as you move the speed, the center is neutral. So if you go all the way to the left, that's going really fast, heading east. And if you go all the way to the right, that's heading fast, going west. So I want to actually change this to where it's moving at a slow rate. Right about there, I think is pretty good. And you see it already kind of looks cool, but it's too much. Yeah, it's way too much. So what we're going to do here is put the grid on. Well, I mean, not the grid, but a mask. And then all I'm going to do is trace in this area, but I want to trace just the areas that have the steam puffs coming up from the original art. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So again, I'm going to hold the Alt key and just kind of left. I'm going to trace inside of the cloud, not all the way around, but on the inside. As you can see, it's kind of obvious there's something there. So what you can do with that is change the amount. And that actually takes it and kind of blends it in better. And then if you want to, you can take the steam effects and put them under the water. And that makes it even more blended. So let me see if that helps. Yeah, but it's the problem is it covers all of it. So you have to kind of play around with what it's going to look like. There we go. And it's under the water. It's still too intense. So you want to put it here. And I don't think this is going to give me the exact desired effect that I'm looking for. So I'm going to delete it altogether. It's not doing quite what I want it to do. And in order for it to blend in, I have to turn it almost all the way down. So I think what I'll do is I'll go for the more of the dramatic, overall effect. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this mist layer. I have the mist layer selected. I'm still going to call it a steam effect, but I'm just going to make one blob instead of all these individuals. So I'll go ahead and delete that, the little garbage can. And I'm going to start over. So I'm going to hit the effects layer. And I am going to pick the mist. And again, I'm going to take the direction of it and move it that way. I think I'll go with 45. Actually, 49 looks good. Yeah, it's a nice rolling. And then I'm going to put the mask on. And now what I'm going to do is just unmask this area going towards the edge of the map. So again, I'm going to freehand it and we'll see how that turns out. Yeah, it's still not quite what I would want. Yeah, it's not giving me exactly what I was hoping for. I mean, it's not bad, but it's certainly not great. So I would probably not use this. Let's see. Yeah, it's really not going to help my cause here. So it's just a trial and error. I mean, you could see it up close. It looks pretty good when you come up close, but when you zoom out, it just looks horrible. It looks like it's moving a lot faster than it should be. Yeah, that's not what I wanted. It's not blending in with the way I was hoping, so that's okay. I'll just delete that. Instead of calling this steam effects, I'm just going to call it weather effects now. So the weather effect would go over the entire map, so that's pretty easy to deal with. So I'm going to go ahead and just add clouds. So I'm going to add an effects layer, and I'm going to drop this down to where it's clouds. And as you can see, the clouds kind of cover everything. You don't want that. So what I'm going to do is draw a square around this entire map. So that way the clouds only show in this portion. But you first got to get a mask going. So here's the enable mask. And now I'm going to draw. And just this time I'll just let it go and it'll draw a square automatically. So I'm not holding Alt this time. There we go. So now it's only showing on this layer and it's not going on the outside of the map, which is what you don't want. And then it kind of makes this look cool too. So that's cool. And then you can play around with it. So I can turn this, I can make this go this way. I kind of liked it better when it went that way and it's not as fast. And then you could turn down the intensity of the clouds. So I might put that in about the middle. You can add more shadow when the clouds come by. I think I will kind of leave that there. And then you have an offset where those shadows are going to cast. So I think in this upper corner is better, so it's not covering the main map as much. And I'm going to turn the shadows down so they're not as prominent. So there's our weather effect for the grounds, and now I'm going to add snow. The thing you got to remember about the snow though is it's got to be under the cloud layer or it's going to look weird. It doesn't have to, it just depends on how it contrasts. So again, I'm going to add another layer. And you got two snow options. You have blizzard and you have snow. Blizzard is crazy. It's like that. And I don't mind that so much. It's just, I think it's a little obnoxious because of the way it blows around. So snow is actually just straight down and it's kind of lighter. And I'm going to turn the size down. And again, I'm going to have to add a mask and I'm going to draw around the edges. Okay, so there's the snow, and then I'm going to take the speed down just a touch, and the intensity, you can really make it stand out if you want. And then the amount, you can turn down the opacity so that it blends in a little bit more. So that's starting to look like snow. And then the snow itself needs to be under the clouds. So normally the snow is not going to be snow through usually it's below the clouds. But anyhow, that's so you can see the cloud movement a little bit better. So there's a snowstorm and it's dumping more snow on top of this place. The hot tub looks pretty good now because it's blending better now that we have all this other stuff going on. And then I'm going to go ahead and turn down the amount of snow a little and the intensity. Because I want to still be able, when I zoom in, I want to still be able to see everything. So There we go. So those are weather effects. So I have the snow beneath the clouds. And then the weather is above the water effects. So when you're making layers, you got to think in layers as well. As like, how's it going to display? What's going to show? What isn't? You know, that sort of thing. All right, so that's basically the outdoor ambiance. Now I need to actually start doing some of the, the line of sight stuff, the occluders. So the only thing I really need to do is occlude the buildings. And all I'm going to do with those is just make those either, I'll probably just make those solid lines. And then or I can just make terrain too, so it wouldn't really matter as much. But normally you couldn't see on top of this rooftop unless you were inside or on top of another roof. So you could do either or. You could put an occluder on top of the building, and then when you get closer, you can actually click on it to open it, and then they could see. The only thing is they can't see past it, and that's all you want, is that they're not going to have the ability to see past the roof. And that would be the only reason why you'd have an occluder. So I think I'm just going to put terrain on the houses and such, or the buildings. That way when you get close, you can click on it and it would open it up. Or in case you're on the rooftop, then I can have this open. So there wouldn't be very many issues with that. So I'm going to go ahead and just use terrain. I think that's the best idea, because if you're up on the rooftop and you have just that red outline, you can't see in here at all. So I'm going to make sure that I have just the green contour. And this little piece here is actually covered. This goes from the house to the barn or to the livestock area. This is actually a kind of a pinnacled roof. So I'm going to go ahead and a kennel for the dogs. And then down here to the south of the dog sleds. So this is an outfitter's. So what I'm going to do here is just kind of trace this contour around here and do the best I can free-handed. The default is to have a square, and it's okay if you overshoot a little bit because you can always go back and adjust. So if you want, you can just kind of go along the edges of it, but you're still going to be using a rectangle because that's the default shape of anything except for the walls. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the line of sight mode. I'm going to turn off the clouds and such for now. That will just turn all that off right now so that when I'm working, I'm not getting distracted. And then I'm going to make sure that I am in the terrain tool, which is the tree. And then whenever you use a terrain tool, it's always going to be like a square. And you can make a rectangle or a circle, but it's still always going to want to be a closed object. So you can't really freehand it like you would a wall. So what I'm going to do is start at this point, then just drop another point here and just keep going. So the trick here, though, is to have it positioned to where you can see what you're doing, but it's zoomed out enough so that you can see the whole shape. And that's a trick that you have to learn what your comfort level is. Because you want to zoom in, but at the same time, you got to be able to drag and drop this from each area. So what I'm going to do is just start on this corner and work my way around. And don't worry about being perfect because you can go back and fix them. I use my arrow key to get down to this point. Again, I'm going to use the arrow key. And then I hit escape to get out of that mode. So I have the occluders on here, and if you zoom in, you can see I wasn't spot on. So if I want to fix that, you go to the selection mode. So you have to be used to going between line, select, rectangle, or ellipse. So mostly you're going to be going to the select tool to change things. So if I click on this point, I can drag it to a better position. So I was told yesterday it's better to overshoot than undershoot. So if you overshoot, you can always reduce. It's harder to produce than it is to reduce, I guess. I guess that's the mindset. It's easier to fix if you overshoot it. And these don't have to be perfect. I'm just getting them a little closer is all. If I wanted to be perfect, I would make another line here and draw off that. I'm not going to worry about it. And there's a reason I did that. I'll show you in a bit. All right, I think we're good. So that's when you zoom out, that's kind of what you want to look at is, see, some of this is shadows, so you don't want to occlude that. So that's basically what you want to look at as far as, something rough on the outside. So here I was going to make this a separate piece. So what I'm going to do is just make this basically like a square. So I got to make sure I'm in the line tool. Right now I'm on the selection tool. Control Z if you make a mistake. And then I hit escape once I connected that dot. So there's that piece. And now I'm going to use those to run the rest of this area here as a separate piece. And snap to grid is on, so if you snap close to the circle, it'll snap to it. Oh, not so bad. And now I'll zoom in a little and kind of fix them. We got to make sure I'm in the select tool. Okay, looks pretty close. All right, so we are there with that. There's a little doghouse that you can't see into very well, so I'll go ahead and line this out. This is the kennel. So in this case, I'm just going to use a rectangle tool. And then I'll adjust it slightly. not sure what I did there. So you can get rid of extra points. So like this would be an extra point. So if I select and I delete point, see that will mess up the wall. And then it breaks it. So I'm going to go ahead and add. I'm just going to leave it. It's not going to hurt anything. All right, so that's basically how that goes. And I think technically if I went to the line tool, and then I took this and highlighted. Nope, that just got rid of the whole thing. Anyhow, there's the dog kennel. That should have been the easiest thing, and I made that the hardest. Okay. On to the bathhouse. It's actually two pieces. There's the undercroft, and then there's the bathhouse itself. So I'm just going to, again, I'm going to use the line tool. You could actually use a square and just, do that and do it in pieces, but I'm going to do the whole thing, so. And like I said, you don't have to be perfect. You want to get close. You have to do a bunch of editing, but. Again, when I was done, I hit escape, or you can double click to end your line. So if I was going to fix this, I need to make sure I'm in the select mode. That's something got to get used to, is going back and forth, back and forth. It's a little better. Okay. Yep, it's better. That was close. For these pinnacle points, there's probably more critical that these points are right, because after you center everything, it'll look off. Okay, we're good to go there. Now I'm going to do this part of the building, which is the overhang. It's kind of like a carport, like somewhere where you can sit under. There's benches and little fire pits and stuff where you cook in case it's really miserable out. Now I got to make sure I'm in the drawing tool of the line. All right. Okay, I think we'll call it good. And this thing here, one of the new features that you can add to your maps is a pit. I think I'm going to make this all a pit because I don't want it to be actually visible until they get up closer to it. And if you're inside here, you're not going to be able to look out. So that's the main thing is the feature of if you're inside here for some reason, you're not going to be looking out. So that's put on the pit. And I'm just going to draw around the periphery. And again, I'm going to hit the line tool and I'm on the pit tool. And right now this is the line of sight layer, so you got to be careful with that. Don't erase that. I've done that a few times. So this is a complete layer of line of sight. That's not what I wanted. All right, so there's my pit. All right, so that's pretty good. There's a snowbank over here, which I think I'll outline that because that's another terrain feature. So I'm gonna go ahead. This is a piled up wall of snow, rocks, debris, you name it. And what it does is it blocks the wind that comes from the northeast, or it blows north or southeast. So what I want to do is block a majority of that wind. So this wall of snow is probably about as tall as these buildings. And what it does is it protects the people that are camping from the harsh, abrasive winds. It keeps the wind down. And also, if you have a fire or anything, you could easily keep it going without it blowing out or blowing all over the place. It gets really heavy. Plus, it keeps this from being a wind tunnel like this thing here. If you have the wind blowing into that, that's really, really hard. So they built the snow wall to keep it down. So I'm going to go ahead and just draw a rough feature around here. So again, I'm going to go to the terrain tool, and I'm just going to draw around this. And I'm going to use the Alt key to freehand. Okay. Close enough. All right, so now I'm going to center the map. And when you're done, let's say you're finished, I might have to touch a few things up, but I have a majority of it done. Yeah, I don't need too much else. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and add the line of sight layer. So when you're in this mode, you select play mode, and then you have to turn on the line of sight. If you don't, you're not going to see the changes. Also, I need to have a character because I don't have two instances set up, so I'm going to just import a character. All right, so I'm going to take and I guess I will, let's see, I will take this character selector and import. Take old Sterling or Alden. If I click that green plus button, it's adding it to the campaign. And this replaces the character manager in Classic. So I'm going to go ahead and open the combat tracker. Drag the character in there. It's very important you do that. And now I'm going to take the character and drag him over to the map. So now when you have this view, What the heck happened there? Look, this big old line. Huh. Strange. Anyways, so when you move him around, you can't see past this rooftop. However, when he's up here, you can see it. Or if he's at the very edge, you can open this and then you'd be able to see it too. So I left that option on there in case you run into that situation. So normally it's closed. So he comes over here to the campsite. Let me zoom in. So there's the campsite. So you can't really see past this too well. But when he's inside or near it, you can open it up. There must be some leakage here. That big long line is something you want to try to avoid. So that means there's some kind of leakage going on with your line. That means somewhere in here they're not connected. So I can fix that later. This is just a reflection, so that's okay. Yep, when you come in here, there's a reflection of the rooftop. Now you can see in the pit, but when you're down inside bathing, you can only see what's in here. And that makes sense. So until you come out of the pit, you're not going to see it. So that makes sense. Now check the front. So here's a dog kennel. Yeah, all in all, not bad. There's a couple bleeding spots that I have to go look at. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's just the way the shadow was. Yeah. It's just the way the shadow was set up. Huh. Same thing with that. That's just the way the shadow's cast. How weird. Probably because it comes out past this area, so. And then these snow things here. I don't know what that's all about, but I think it's the same problem. Yeah, it's the way it's shadows. So it's not any bleeding at all. It's just how the shadows come out. Pixelated, kind of. All right, so that's basically your outdoor line of sight. And then you have a pit. So that's pretty cool. So I think that's all I'm going to get into today. But this map is done, so I can lock it. And I'll right click and remove this token off here. But I'll use him in other maps. So I think the next map I'm going to tackle is... Did I already do this one? I know I did the bathhouse yesterday, so it has to be this one. Yeah, it's this one. Yeah, so this is the one with the doors. Hey, there's Doric. Hey, get out of my dressing room. That's what this is. It's a dressing room. And then here's the bathhouse itself. So this is what they're going into when they come into the bathhouse. And then there's the front doorway. There's the sink with water in it. You can see it's kind of moving around. And I even put stains on the toilet. So if you come in here, there's some stains around the toilet. Probably from cleaning it for people missing the toilet. And then I did some other things yesterday. I have a picture of it's a handout of the bulletin board. When you come to the place, it has all the features and stuff. And I went ahead and I took the snow and I kind of backed it off a little bit. Let's see if that's the right one. Yeah, so this is the bulletin board. So when you go to Merle's, you'll have this bulletin board when you come up when it's snowing, and you can see what they have. Then there's pins on there, but they don't show in the module yet. And then I did just kind of like a handout for the Wilderness Outfitters itself, which was this map here, or this image. So I just made more snow. I put some smoke type features in here. Pretty sure this is the right map. Yeah. I put a little bit of wiggle in the trees so it looks like when the when the wind comes, it blows. And then this light here, I added a little bit of movement here so that the light, when it looks like it's fluctuating a little bit from the distance. It's hard to tell, but it's there. And I was going to take and line these out and put like moving shadows in here so it looks like people are inside, but I said, yeah, it's just getting too much. So I actually put some moving clouds that are moving up here on the top. It's really subtle, you can't see it. But we made the smoke actually undulate a little bit, which is really subtle too. And then these trees here, I put a little movement on them. So it was a lot of fun, actually. So anyhow, that's what I got for the day. Hopefully you learned something. I will do this when I can, off and on. This is not really a formal lesson or anything. I'm just kind of going through and checking on the different tools and such that you have to work with in Fantasy Grounds. So you have a good Saturday, and I hope to see you around the community. If you haven't joined Fantasy Grounds College, all the information about the college is in the description, and I hope to see you guys around. Bye-bye.